Welcome to the Microsoft Cloud Option webinar series. My name is Vivek Bhatnagar. I am a CTO and founder for UnifyCloud. We are shifting our gears to talk about more how do you operationalize the cloud, because day-to-day operation is one of the important aspect of a successful cloud implementation. So how do you manage a baseline for your cloud deployment, and which is like how do you define your assets, how do you classify them, how do you put the value of the configuration, what are the tools you are going to use, what are process you are going to use every day, which include all sorts of process, backup process, management process, update process, and all those things. And then also link that operation with your business commitment, because the reason which we are all doing is we are supporting a particular business process or a business people. So what is our commitment based on our process? So how much SLA we can commit to them? What is our data processing time, and how the critical reports would be generated? So that basically aligning the baseline with the business commitment. And finally, expanding this baseline to accommodate more complex work operations and design. So let's look into these things. Here you can actually see what are the methods to enable. So this is just a complete framework of a cloud operation. So you can see it's a it's a four-part discipline. So you can see that establish management baseline, and there are ways to establish, like three ways to manage to establish a baseline. Then you have a business alignment, that how do you align that baseline with your business commitments. And finally, advanced operations, like means supporting advanced workloads, supporting your critical workloads, enhanced baseline, and which also lead to some of the workload specialization, advanced operations, and others. Let's look at all these parts here. And first part, definitely the and the why we need a baseline, and it's again linked to the management principles. That baseline we required to deliver our commitment to business. So if we have committed our business that we are going to support a process in which the whole thing is up and running, how do we define, how do we basically have our infrastructure to certain baseline? So that's what, like, a linkage between a baseline and our commitments. So define basic tools for management of operations, focus on minimum options, and how do we and manage consistency? How do we make sure that all resources are properly configured and up and running? That's all. That's all like coming to a management baseline, and it is linked to the management commitments. Then how do we build a management baseline? The first thing is do an inventory visibility. It means that we should exactly know how many assets we are running in our cloud, and what are their states. So in what states they are, what should be their end state or regular state, and how I'm measuring that state. So how do I put operation compliance and all, and what things we are putting to protect that state and recover in case of a problem. In case of a problem, there should be automation to recover it. So if you look at a little bit detail in case of uh, uh, inventory visibility, there are tools in Azure, for example, Azure Resource Graph, or other things, which will give you a complete inventory of assets running in your cloud. You can actually use the same tool a lot more time to inventory your the cloud running on premise, and you can use the same thing to inventory things running on other cloud. So these things are basically very important to understand the cloud inventory. Then how do you what duration you take inventory? How do you log that if there's something missing? How do you centralize logging every resource of it? And how do you manage the changes, like in case somebody changed that visibility? So this is all come into inventory and visibility. This is a process which typically uh, in an organization you might be doing every day in some sort of a automation fashion. So you can actually have a dashboard of all the assets, and you can very quickly look at what assets are in what state, and in case of you need to take an action. But Azure provide you a lot of services to help you with, like for example, log analytics, which is integrated service and collect all the logs, Azure activity logs to find out in case somebody has changed, or Azure Monitor for VMs or Network Watcher. These are the tools available which you can configure to make sure that you have very good visibility for your all assets, and you know their current state, and you know like what's the steady state of all these assets. Then in the operation compliances, like again, that is like establishing for each of resource a process to ensure that they are in a consistent desired state, or they are running in a well-governed environment. Another thing, and it is typically done by managing something like your update solution. So how you are managing update in for all those assets, what kind of policies are being enforced, is there any automated compliance which is comparing the configuration value with those compliances, and how effectively you are seeing this in some sort of a dashboard, just to ensure that everything is up and running in a consistent fashion. The way you have designed your landing zone, it's in place, all configuration values in place, and there is an automated remediation in place, because when you look at your cloud environment, they are always like, even for 5,000 assets, you will have approximately 2,000 settings. So managing operation compliance without automation is a very, very difficult task. Then so for managing compliances, we have Azure Automation, Azure Updates, and Azure Policies, and Azure Blueprint, these kinds of services available. When you look at like how do we protect our baseline, and this is like what we would be doing in case something uh, something went wrong. So what will happen if you accidentally delete a VM or database or data store or something, then or something happen in some Azure regions, and this is this is like not very common, but things happen. Like there are times in that history when we lost Azure region for maybe a couple of hours and other thing. And then how do you protect your business critical workloads so that they can come back? And if you have committed an SLA to your business that that the recovery time will be less than an hour or 2 hours, based on that, you need to build your plan. You need to build your plan for short term and long term, which might be a backup or application of VMs, or maybe you have a complete disaster recovery plan into other data centers, or maybe a multi-cloud plan based on what SLA commitment you have given, what the numbers you have agreed with your business. So that call like completely protect and recover, and it's very important to think about in this fashion, that how do we going to plan for Azure backup, Azure disaster recovery, Azure site recovery, and how much time and SLA we are committing. Ultimately, like all of these get into something called what we are committing to business. Uh, the business alignment is one of the most important thing to define your management or operational policies and baseline. Uh, it is required in the sense that the business people run particular processes which you are supporting different applications and other thing. So if that process stop, or the process needs some kind of SLA so that business people can do their commitments. So we have to document talking to business, like we have to think about in form of criticality. So what are the business processes are most important for a business? For example, like invoicing might be most important for a car company because they don't have a space to store all new manufactured cars. So that's a critical process. So you have to ask them about their all the critical process, or you may ask them to rate on the criticality, that high, medium, low, and based on their definition, then you can look at what are the assets supporting those, and make sure that in case of disaster recovery, you are recovering most critical process first, and then you go into the same sequence. You can also ask them like other dimensions, that what the impact is. So maybe a process is a most critical and most impact, then it is the first priority to recover that process, or first priority to restore in case of a problem. And so giving commitment to business, and you can always give commitment like in form of availability, like 2 nines, 3 nines, or 4 nines, or you can give in commitment of SLAs of downtime and other things. Multiple ways you can give commitment to a business, or commitment for completing a business processes like invoicing or budgeting and other part. So always document it very well that these are the commitment for criticality, for impact, and what are commitment to business. And based on those things, definitely you can actually build, you can align your management baseline towards it. There are like few definitions here while talking to customer, mainly on criticality side, where they can define you different. They can put different processes and assets into criticality scale, and then you can actually use a predefined template, like for example, Azure Disaster Recovery, or there are a lot of run books you can configure that in case anything happens to those assets, it will recover in a particular sequence and in a sequence of criticality. Talking about business impact, there is also like serve as some sort of a, again, prioritization variables. Like, so you have criticality and business impact, and typically impact is considered like mostly in the sometime in the time, like, what is like how much time business can afford losing that system, so RTO and RPO numbers. So you can look at criticality and business impact just to find out that how much that what the sequence of your bringing those workload back to the system in case of any issues. Then you talk about like establishing business commitments, and this is mostly about business alignments. Here, like the main thing we talked about, that we have asked them criticality and impact ratings, but based on their criticality and impact rating, we will give them our commitment in form of availability, in the form of recovery, in the form of the cost, in the form of like IT operations. So all these factors we can give it. There is a sample also available, like which you can look at on Microsoft website, which talks about different workloads. So you can see that there are different workloads here, which actually give you like criticality, time values, commitment level, SLAs, monthly costs, if there is an outage, and what will the cost comparison. So this is a table typically you can actually you can create yourself, and there are always discussion how much time value impact, and this sometime like you get a number, sometimes you don't get a number. You can put a high, medium, or low kind of thing, and then move to the next part. But you having this kind of template or worksheet ready is one of the very important to basically plan the backup, plan your disaster recovery, plan your recovery sequence, and other thing. Now move to the third and fourth dimension of our management baseline and business alignment, and the third and fourth basically driven by the criticality of the workload. So we have a minimum baseline available, which we can actually expand it when we want to support critical workloads. And these are the critical workloads which might be supporting a very critical function for the company. And so that's why, like, to support those, you need to maybe enhance your baseline. It may be a workload which need stringent SLAs, or maybe workload which need speedier recovery time, or workload which need a higher availability. So always ask your business people that how do they look at these kinds of workload, and some workloads are very, very critical. And in case of you find these kinds of workload, then you can always look at the like expanding baseline, and there are multiple ways of baseline expansion you can do. You can actually, for example, in case of availability, you can actually do multiple ways of replicating as a disaster recovery. So you can actually replicate and reduce the downtime to few minutes to zero downtime based on which architecture you are adopting for disaster recovery, or based on which architecture you are adopting for your backup. The typical processes which you need to look at: how do you do operation automation? How do you do the automation in case you are having a multi-cloud things? And it is like mainly to achieve a desired state configuration and in an automated fashion, because it's a because of SLAs and all, everything written as a code, and you can actually use it. The prime services and tools available to achieve this is Azure Resource Graph, IT Service Management connectors, Azure automations, and other aspect, which can help you in doing uh, enhancing a particular baseline, and basically it is enhancing your commitment for to the management and management processes. Then these are the specialized and advanced operations, and these are like for a specific workload, and basically minimize interruption of these. For example, if you are running critical workload like SAP, or you are running a critical workload which is doing a very critical process for an organization, then these are specialized workload. And for these specialized workload, you actually define the complete process again. So you have a baseline for these, you have a commitment to management for these, and then finally use specific services to manage these advanced operations and other things. The typical examples for these, as we discussed, like your databases, or maybe your SAP workloads, or maybe your enterprise ERP workloads and other thing. To manage these kinds of workload, you can always use the standard Microsoft architecture templates, which is given as Microsoft architecture frameworks. You can always use standard services, for example, Azure Monitor for containers, or Azure Automation, which will help you in quickly specifically define the baseline for these platform specialization. Then we have different advanced operation tools where you actually want to implement some sort of a best practices for these. And again, it is monitoring best practices that you can do with using services like Azure Monitors, or Application Insight, or Azure Automations, and other aspect of things. With this, like we have covered two important part, like what is Azure Governance Framework, and how do you build the 5 discipline of the Azure Governance Framework, and then how do you build the management framework. Here, if you look at some of the tools available to you, we have seen that in our first lecture, Cloud Journey Tracker, and then Governance Benchmark. So these are the two tools. I highly recommend to at least use this governance tool here, and I'll just pull, if I can pull a website which actually give you all. So this is the Microsoft website. Now they have consolidated all the available assessment into one. And definitely the governance benchmark is one of the assessment that you should be doing. And then you can always try the other assessment like Cloud Journey Tracker and other aspect of things. And the other two assessment are typically, so it's Azure Architecture Review, and Azure is like, this is the very new one, Migration Readiness Assessment, which will plot your readiness for migrating into all these dimensions.